So now Boris is facing an investigation by the Privileges Committee. Do you have any concern for him and this process that he'll be going through and the whole procedure of it?
I do have a concern about the procedure of it, to be honest, because I'm in favour of fairness. I hold no brief for Boris Johnson, whom I thought was an absolutely appalling Prime Minister. But I think that the question of due process and fairness is incredibly important. If what he said in the House was untrue, that's one thing. If it can be shown that he deliberately told an untruth, that is another thing and a very serious thing, but that is quite a challenge for that to be proved. Do I think that where other matters are concerned, things that weren't even in the chamber, things that he might or might not have said in interviews or in meetings in Downing Street or whatever, should be the subject of cross-examination? I do. I think he should have the right to cross-examine. Should he be able to deploy legal representation? In my opinion, yes. I think that we come back to this question of parliamentary privilege. It's very important that there aren't unfairnesses committed in the name of a parliamentary process. Parliamentary privilege exists to allow members of Parliament to champion great causes, to call out wrongdoing when they might not necessarily be able to prove it in a court, but they want to highlight a great cause. I don't think anybody ever seriously thought that a workplace bullying process would be conducted on the principle that it was subject to parliamentary privilege. Parliamentary privilege is supposed to be about the proceedings of Parliament, and most people normally interpret that to mean debates and committee proceedings, not a workplace regulatory process. And as far as former Prime Minister Johnson is concerned, I hold no brief for him, and I have every respect for Harriet Harman, who chairs the Privileges Committee, but I think the question of the procedural propriety of that process is absolutely critical. It should be front and centre stage, and I would say that whether it was Boris Johnson being investigated or anybody else. Very often what you get in these processes, if I may say so, is tribalism. So you get people on the right attacking people they regard as opponents, and people on the left attacking people that they regard as opponents. So, for example, Priti Patel was accused of bullying. I'm not going to say whether I think Priti was guilty of bullying or not. I don't know. I can say only in my personal dealings with her, she was always unfailingly courteous. We always got on very well. I've no idea how she treated her staff, but there were suggestions that she was guilty of bullying, and there were people on the left who rushed to attack her, and there were people on the right who rushed to say, no, that's not true at all. She's just robust. She's just standing up to useless officials and making progress at the Home Office. But those people who were rushing to defend her, and I can think of a number of them, were very quick to round on me. Why? Well, because they liked Priti, but they didn't like me, just as there were people on the left who attacked her and stood up for me. So what I would say is let's try to depoliticize this and establish a proper process. All I would say is this on the bullying issue, beyond what I've already said. Look, I'm the father of 3 kids. I want my children to go in the workplace and not to be sworn up, not to be shouted at, not to be threatened, not to be intimidated, not to be bullied by being denied adequate work and then told, oh, well, you're surplus to requirements. In other words, not being frozen out and not being given so much work that they can't possibly cope, which again can be a form of bullying. I don't want any of my 3 kids, our 3 kids, to experience that. But I do think we're in some danger of getting to a point at which anybody who says, oh, well, I was offended by that, I feel very upset by what was said, or I didn't approve of being told I had to do X or Y or Z, all of a sudden can shout, bullying, that's not right, this can't be accepted, I must be allowed to protest, etc. I would say to any manager in the private sector, the public sector, or the voluntary sector watching this programme, frankly, I'm concerned for you, because you should have the right to manage. And without going into the details, and I won't go into the details, and you wouldn't expect me to go into the details, I faced a situation where I wanted certain arrangements in my office, and I was told, no, you've got to agree to have X and Y removed from your office. And I said, no, I'm not agreeing to that. I'm not agreeing to that, and I must be allowed to decide who works in my office. And it was subsequently said, oh, well, because I had originally agreed to the idea of a change and changed my mind, which I did, I had every right, in my view, to change my mind, that caused great upset, and a working relationship never recovered, and the person concerned felt bullied. I'm sorry, but this is nonsense on stilts. It really is absurd. And the key point is, it wouldn't survive a moment's scrutiny in a court of law. Could the people investigating or adjudicating on these matters debate these points with me in open session in a court of law? They couldn't. They'd be ripped to shreds. And then what would happen? Then I'd be referred to the League Against Cruel Sports. You can't win. But it's a nonsense. It is an absolute nonsense. I'm flawed. I made mistakes. I didn't bully people. And, for some character who doesn't know me from Adam to come along and say, oh, well, I bullied people on a serious or serial basis or told lies, really is unadulterated piffle. I've got into trouble over the years for being too candid, but I have not told a single lie, not in that process and not in my political life at any other time. And if the bigot faction, who were arraigned against me and already decided what they wanted to find, if the bigot faction want to say, oh, well, he's a bully or he's a liar or whatever, they can, and they're entitled to their view, but they suffer from the very serious disadvantage of being completely 100% wrong.